Okay, I am live, and today we're going to be talking about whatever is on my mind. This is just an exercise in getting some stuff posted out in the world. I haven't been posting on this channel lately. It's kind of a nonsense channel, faceless channel, just a bunch of silly nonsense. But let's go ahead and start off talking about this story right here. The Pope released a statement on AI, and he's encouraging people to essentially lean into the better nature of it. AI can be your angle or your decibel. That is for sure. This is a tool which cuts both ways. Uh, at its best, AI can be used to help alleviate poverty and give people attention, give people economic access. But it can also be used to shut people off from economic access. It can be used to profile people and exclude them, keep them at an arm's length, disallow them from participation in the economy. It can be either or. It's both utopian and dystopian in the same frame. I definitely agree with the Pope here. It is better for everybody that AI be used for uh, betterment of humanity rather than causing greater issues. Um, Populations around the globe exploded with the agricultural revolution and the industrial revolutions. They continued that trend until eventually we hit the information revolution. And now, because the economy is based on this very complex uh, labor market, which is very disenfranchised from its traditional modalities, we're seeing a lot of issues. Right, it's difficult to give everybody a job which pays commensurate with what it requires to live comfortably. Right, so there's a lot of nonsense jobs out there. There are a lot of jobs which really don't produce much. Google Stadia, for example. I don't remember exactly how much they spent developing Google Stadia, but I believe it was billions of dollars. It's supposed to be a game streaming service, so you could essentially use Google's graphics cards to play games in your browser. That was the concept. So instead of needing a gaming computer, you could just use their gaming computers through a rental service. That launched several years ago and was promptly shut down because it didn't generate enough revenue. But they spent billions of dollars getting it launched. So Google logged a net loss on that project. But all the developers still got paid. And, essentially that's the nature of the economy these days. There's a lot of stuff which is done, which is purely financial, is shuffling around a deck of cards. And one way to look at it is to say that that's bad because people are not producing things but still getting paid. They're not really moving the economy in any significant measure. But on the other hand, what else can we do? We kind of have to invent jobs which are ultimately not necessary in order to keep people employed. So I see pointless office jobs, weird bureaucratic jobs as a necessary annoyance. It's kind of annoying. I talk to people about their work experiences with what I'm currently doing, and a lot of people have signaled this in one form or another, that they don't feel satisfaction from the work that they're doing. They feel like the projects they're working on as software developers are not really accomplishing anything of any significant merit. There are tons of large software development teams out there at these huge companies, like Fortune 500 companies, and they piece the work out so thin that your average developer is solving one or two Jira tickets They're not making some huge technical contribution. They are doing very, very, very small targeted work that doesn't really even need to be done in a lot of instances. A lot of what people do is completely superfluous to the end product. So one of the things I'm hearing from a lot of people is that they want project ownership. They want to be able to really feel like their work has meaning. And that's actually rather difficult. Most services that we need have already been built. A lot of what goes on in Fortune 500 companies, these very large companies, is the equivalent of shuffling around papers. And I guess my conclusion, the point I'm trying to make here is that's not a bad thing. That's just how the world is. We need people to be liberal with their economics, laissez-faire capitalists. It's a good thing to spread wealth. Jeff Bezos recently did an interview where he's catching a lot of flack. He's advocating that the bottom 50% of America should not even pay income tax, should not pay taxes. He referenced a nurse in Queens making $75,000 a year, paying $1,000 a month in taxes, and says that she shouldn't pay any of that. And he also says that if they were to tax him for 5% of his total wealth, that wouldn't ultimately improve the living standards of anybody. And I can't help but agree with Jeff Bezos on this. The problem is not that billionaires are not being taxed. I mean, maybe you can look at that and, there's some valid arguments to be made. But it's that even if Congress had access to 5% of Jeff Bezos' wealth, how do you think they're going to allocate that tax money? They're not going to allocate it to help a nurse in Queens. They're not going to allocate it. There's one tweet that got a lot of attention that said if we tax Jeff Bezos for 5% of his wealth, we could increase teachers' salaries by X amount. Well, do you think that Congress, if they had access to that tax capital, do you think that they're going to allocate that to increasing teachers' salaries? No, they absolutely wouldn't. So, I don't claim to have like the be all end all answer, but essentially what I would advocate is that AI should be used to spread wealth. We should see it as a national security prerogative to ensure that Americans have financial stability and feel dignified, because the alternative is civil unrest, which is something which Larry Fink recently said he's worried about. Drone attacks. Yeah, Larry Fink, the head of BlackRock, said he's worried about backlash against data centers and attacks on data centers by the public. And there were multiple executives who got booed at college commencement and graduation addresses recently. People are distrusting of AI. This idea that you can cut jobs, that AI replaces humans. Ultimately, that's not true, right? It might be an effective strategy to cut headcount at these corporations and then increase profit by saying, you have less obligation, you don't have to pay as many people. But that's kind of a short-term strategy. I would say that when you're paying salaries, you're paying for brand image, right? If you have an employee on the payroll, they'll probably speak positively about your organization. If you start cutting people off from the payroll, they tend to not have a positive opinion about you anymore, right? So managing perception and recognizing that late stage capitalism, which we are in, where everything has already been quantized for value, everybody depends upon passing the buck, right? You got to be quick to share. I'm not somebody who's anti-capitalist. I'm not somebody who's against billionaires. There are people out there that literally call for the execution of billionaires. I'm not one of those people. I don't think that we should be cutting down billionaires, but I still think that billionaires should recognize the dilemma for what it is, and that they are the only people who are capable of leading out of these problems, right? On the one hand, is it really their responsibility? Do they really have an obligation? Well, technically, no. But at the same time, they are the only people with the capital and the connections to lead in this tumultuous time period. So they have to step up to the plate, right? If we are setting up systems where people are getting paid, despite the fact that their work is largely redundant or unnecessary, well, so be it. That might just be what we have to do. There's issues in China where a lot of people graduating from universities are not getting the sort of jobs that they want. It's the same the world over. Well, I think that it's vital that the leadership see it as an economic and a national security prerogative to essentially float people a check. So what if you hire somebody and you pay them a salary and ultimately they don't really produce that much? That's just what you need for society to be functioning properly. That's what you need to prevent social unrest, right? So that would be what I advocate for. AI should not be used to cut people off from economic avenues. Instead, they should be analyzing people. If they're going to be analyzing people in aggregate and processing all of this data, they should be using it to assess whether or not people are economically stable and stepping in to present them with opportunities for lucrative employment, things like this, right? Yeah, it's tricky. As it stands, there is massive backlash and revenge against society attacks. They're happening. People are going postal because when you don't have any sort of hope for the future, when you can't live comfortably, when you feel stressed out and don't have access to economics, I mean, really, what do you expect somebody to do? Everybody has a breaking point. You may think that you wouldn't be like that if you're somebody who's never really been exposed to severe financial stress, but that is definitely how it works. If Larry Fink, for some reason, were not the chairman of BlackRock and he was just some random salaried individual that lost his job and couldn't find a good replacement and couldn't afford to do the things he wanted to do with his life, he would be pissed off. He would be stressed. He would be one of so many types of ways about it, right? And that's all I really have on that. Let's use AI to help people, uplift people. Let's see economic success of citizens as a national security initiative. That is my message as far as AI goes. All right. Now, as for me, what am I doing? Well, I'm doing what I can to set up a financial success for myself. I have my own business. I'm not going to go into too much details about it, but essentially, I want to be amongst the capitalist class, right? I want to have enough capital to do the things I want to do with my life. And, I'm not going to blame people who have a lot of money. I'm not going to, I don't know. It is what it is. If you can't beat them, join them. My goal would be to get enough operating capital that I can actually have influence, gain an audience, gain a network, and have capital to invest in projects which will improve the situations that we see around the world, of which there are so many. There are so many fucked up things going on around the planet, right? So what do I want to do with my time? Well, there's a number of things I want to do. I want to design some computer peripherals. I have a lot of little projects. Like computer engineering is very interesting to me. Software development is very interesting to me. It would be a stretch goal to have the capital to hire engineers to assist me in developing products and bringing them to market. I have a method which I am looking to scale, which could conceivably give me the sort of revenue I need to be able to afford to do that, but it's a work in progress. These things take time. It's not immediate. It takes effort and persistence. It's not handed on a silver platter. It's not easy. So that's what I'm going through in my personal life right now, trying to get my business at operational capacity, earning the sort of revenue to be able to fund the things I want to do with my life. Now, what is it that I want to do with my life other than start technology businesses and develop products? Well, I also want to do some traveling. And one of the ways in which I want to travel is probably through getting some sort of camper van. So I want to take a minute and look at some of these camper vans. People do these camper van conversions on Sprinter vans, which are really cool. You can set up, mobile internet. You get yourself a shower, a full bathroom, a bed, a kitchen, and what else do you really need? It's like a mobile house. RVs are typically very large and require a CDL. But if you get one of these smaller Sprinter vans, it's a little bit more stealthy. It's a little bit more lightweight. And I just think it's really cool. So eventually that is something I want to do for sure. I think it'd be awesome to just kind of travel up and down coastlines in your Sprinter van with everything you need. And have a home base, obviously. I don't want to be living out of a Sprinter van with no permanent residence to return to, but provided that you have a personal residence, having a Sprinter van is kind of like having a land yacht. That's one way to look at it. It's kind of like a yacht. A yacht is like a floating apartment, right? And a Sprinter van conversion is like an apartment on wheels. So I want to take a moment here and look at some of these camper vans and Sprinter vans. First off, there's this Chinese company. Chinese EVs have been largely banned inside of the US for import because they're so cheap. They're so cheap that they're outcompeting the American market. And this first van is so cheap, it's kind of crazy to look at. This is
wheels, a private rooftop terrace, a home office, and enough electricity to power a small village. And how about a real water?
So you have everything in there. A washing machine, you have multiple beds. I think the total price is about $13,000. And it's not massive either. You have a rooftop terrace that expands, so you can sit up in a. I'm getting some lag on my computer. I don't really know what that's about. Maybe the powers that be don't want to talk about cheap electronic Chinese vehicles. But yeah, it's really cool. 2 stories. You have a bathroom there on the left. You have a kitchen. Imagine just getting on your computer. If you work from your computer, as I do, you can just go from town to town, go from city to city, see some cool stuff, have a fully operational house on wheels. This is a really solid setup for the price. There's nothing which is in this sort of price range with this feature set in the Americas. China, this volume is $54,000, which is incredible. Since it's lagging so much, I might just pass by, though. I really never get lag, so it's very odd that I am getting lag. But yeah, imagine hanging out up and down the coast. You go wherever you want to go. You save money on hotels. All right, so Chinese trade show for RVs. Here is a more traditional Sprinter van conversion. Right. So, you get everything you need in there. You get your kitchen, your bathroom, you have running water, you have a bed, you have a table, you set up your computer however you want to. And I think that'd be really cool. I think that'd be really awesome. So once I get the money, I'm in the market for something like this. This is a Sprinter VIP luxury van. So the idea here is you get a chauffeur, and then the business class people can sit in the back. These things are also really cool. It's less of a sleeper van, but more of a alternative to I don't know. Ideally, you would want to not drive yourself if you were wealthy enough, because that gives you less risk. Driving is kind of risky because you're responsible for whatever happens. It takes your attention and your time. You can't be doing something else while you're driving. So getting chauffeured around, if you're very, very wealthy, able to do work from the back of your van, quite a cool concept. Next, let's talk about, like I said, I would only really want a Sprinter van provided that I have a permanent residence. I don't think that living out of a van is very cool if you don't have your money together, right? Having your only residence be a Sprinter van would be kind of brutal, because then you could never leave. But if you have a residence and then you get a luxury Sprinter van conversion, that's pretty ace. That's pretty cool. That's pretty minted. So I'm interested in something like a barn dominium or a hangar conversion or like a workshop. My idea is you want as much functional space as possible. So a big open room with some workout equipment, several sit-stand tables, TVs on the wall, monitors attached to the desks, the ability to work out whenever I want, a soccer field attached outside, maybe a greenhouse and a stable. I'd like to raise horses if I had the income, or an aviary, a kennel for dogs, stuff like that. Something out in the countryside somewhere in the United States. And just a very large functional space where I can do whatever I want to do. Get some select workout equipment and a really nice computer setup and a full-size soccer field outside. I really love soccer, and particularly just practicing soccer. Like, I don't really have any interest in playing on a team, but kicking the ball around for an hour a day is something I would absolutely do with a full-size field. Just taking shots on goal, stuff like that. So yeah, the dream is to get myself a homestead with a very large functional building, have my successful business and generate enough revenue to be able to pivot into specialized projects for several ideas I have for products which I don't see on the market yet. And just establish a really solid and large amount of business contacts. I want to be well connected. Of course, this is all easier said than done, but this is my life's ambition. So, I'm not gonna stop. I'm still young. I still have time. Ideally, it happens pretty quick. I think it's completely possible. I built a business model which is capable of scaling, but I still have to successfully scale it. Pretty well positioned, but ultimately, it takes two to tango. You have to have people willing to pay you in order to earn money. The idea that somebody might say, hey, be self-sufficient, start your own business. Okay, well, even when you start your own business, you're still dependent on other people. Nobody can escape codependency completely. If you use markets in a market economy, you're codependent. Even if you're independently wealthy, you require people to sell you things in exchange for currency. You require people to accept your business offerings to give you the currency required to buy those things. So I think that everybody should keep that in mind and remain, cognizant of the network effect of wealth. And, that's just kind of how it is. So yeah, I want to build a large building like this or one of these other ones I have prepared. I just leaked a bit of information there. That's all good. Not really trying to be anonymous or pseudonymous. I don't mind being doxxed, but I'm also not trying to be doxxed. Right. So I'd probably go for a little bit more open space than is in here. But overall, the sort of building footprint is kind of what I'm looking at. Right. Not much else to say about it. And without anybody here to respond to the things I'm saying, the conversation doesn't really, there is no conversation. This is a monologue, so it doesn't really have any direction to go. It just is how it is. So finally, I would say that I would potentially look at, I do want to travel the world some. China is obviously very cool. They have a lot of modern infrastructure. There are people out there that hate on China. China definitely has its issues, but it's really awesome at the same time. You wouldn't want to go to China and live the most difficult life of the people there. Yes, there is quite a bit of poverty, but in general sense, anybody who is traveling between nations is by definition going to have access to a considerable amount of capital, right? Your earning potential is necessarily greater if you are somebody who travels internationally. So, China, if you have access to wealth, is really cool. right? Very peaceful society. If you stay to the high class areas, very high quality construction. If you're going out to the urban villages, maybe you see some stuff which is less so desirable. But if you're staying within top tier cities in the most developed areas, China is very cool. And I definitely want to go there. No secret about that. It'd be awesome to do business with Chinese entities, something that just comes with time. So, apartments in Shenzhen, for example, really cool, really cheap. This is a smaller one, um, very affordable. Here's a much bigger one. Right. So you hear people complain about like tofu drag and stuff like this, but when you're talking about that, you're talking about typically not top tier cities. You're talking about um, stuff out in the countryside, away from major metropolitan areas. If you are a foreigner staying in top tier cities and you're choosing your location properly, you're not going to have that kind of experience, right? And if you lived out there and you were ethnically Chinese and you grew up in China, those places aren't that bad either for the most part. People attack China quite a bit. And I think it's because I don't really know. The big two, Lao Y 86 and Serpent ZA, you have to question why they never talk about anything bad that happens in America while attacking China all the time. Are they getting paid to do that? I mean, ultimately they are, because they have a monetized channel and patrons and stuff like this. I see the good and bad in everything. So does China have a lot of issues? Yes. Am I the person to go in and solve all of those problems? No. I'm more than willing to help where I can, provided they want my help. But ultimately, it's not my goal to go to China and have some sort of huge, social campaign. It's my goal to go to China and enjoy the environment. There are some really cool card shops in China. There's actually quite a considerable player base for all the card games that I play. I also play League of Legends some. I think it'd be awesome to just hang out at Chinese LAN centers and play video games with random people, play card games with random people. I'm learning a small amount of Mandarin slowly. So who knows, sometime within the next decade, maybe I'll be wealthy enough. That would be the goal, to just straight up go to China and buy an apartment somewhere. Get a tourist visa, maybe they have a special green card for people who invest a certain dollar amount in Chinese businesses. So that would be my preferred way of entry into China, is to just be an investor of a considerable size that is capable of attaining residence status through my business. That would be most ideal. But ultimately, I just want to go there and experience a culture which is on the upswing, right? We can't say that America is in an upswing right now. It's kind of stalled out. It's good for some and not for others. But in China, you get the sense that there is just a general cultural victory, kind of like if you were playing the Civilization game series. There's all sorts of new buildings, all sorts of new businesses, all sorts of new technology. Even if you're not among the economic elite living within China, you still can't help but be wrapped up in the sense that you're living in a society which is experiencing a golden era, right? So I really want to go to China and walk around and just kind of take in the scenery. And that is a stretch goal of mine. So I suppose that's enough said about that. But yeah, if you can get an apartment like this for a couple hundred US a month, somewhere between like 300 US to 800 US, can get you apartments with multiple bedrooms in pretty good areas. It's kind of hard to argue against that. As long as you're capable of adapting to everything being in Chinese, using translators and studying basic language knowledge, as long as you're okay with that, which I am, I think it's pretty hard to argue against China. It's a cool place, and I definitely want to go there and see this stuff. Sounding like a broken record, but it is what it is. So, we've been live now for about 37 minutes, and I think I pretty much said everything I have to say. Trying to scale out a business, earn enough money to be able to purchase the things that I want to buy. I want to be part of the global business class and travel China and do some other things as well. We've got a lot of personal projects that I want to work on that are quite pricey. I think that I have a pretty good mind for technology and business in general, but I am not 100% capable of doing everything alone, because even if you are a self-starter, eventually you depend upon other people to collaborate with you. If you run a business, you need a client who is willing to pay to really establish your business. So that's where I'm at. That's what I'm doing with myself. This channel is kind of a nonsense channel. I probably won't be posting on here very much. I just figured I would go live and make a record of this just because I felt like it. So now it's here. AI can parse it. Anybody can view it if they want to. It's probably not that interesting to other people, but here it is. So if you did happen to see this, and you did happen to make it all the way to the end of the stream, go ahead and leave a comment. Say hello to me. Let me know what you think about everything.